The medals caught the afternoon light through the stained glass windows. 4 rows of them, each one a moment of blood or brilliance reduced to colored ribbon and stamped metal. Rachel Morgan stood at the back of Ocean View Memorial Chapel in full Marine Corps dress blues, the fabric crisp enough to cut, every crease aligned with the precision that had become her second language over 24 years of service. The Navy Cross sat highest on her chest, flanked by the Bronze Star with its small bronze V for valor, the Purple Heart she'd earned in Fallujah, the Defense Superior Service Medal that came with her promotion to colonel. Below those, 3 rows of campaign ribbons, combat action badges, and the small golden parachutist wings that marked her time with Marine Special Operations. No one was looking at her. They faced forward, toward the closed casket draped in an American flag, toward the minister who spoke in that particular funeral cadence that made every life sound noble and every death feel inevitable. He was saying something about Thomas Morgan, factory manager for 37 years, devoted husband, proud father of 3 successful children, a man who pulled himself up by his bootstraps, who taught his kids the value of hard work, who never asked anyone for a handout, who built a good life through discipline and determination. Rachel's jaw tightened imperceptibly, the only outward sign of the fury building behind her ribs. Never asked anyone for a handout. The words landed like artillery fire. She knew the math too well. $403,200 in mortgage payments over 12 years, $220,000 for Marcus's MBA at Wharton, $180,000 to launch Vanessa's real estate empire, $340,000 in medical bills across 3 heart procedures. The numbers scrolled through her mind like a casualty report, each one a piece of the careful architecture she'd built to keep this family standing, while they congratulated themselves on their self-sufficiency. The front pews held the people who should have known better. Her mother, Patricia, sat in black Chanel, tissue pressed to her nose, the picture of dignified grief. Beside her, Marcus in a Tom Ford suit that cost more than most Marines made in a month, his arm around his mother's shoulders in a display of filial devotion that would have been touching if Rachel didn't know exactly how many times he'd borrowed money from their parents and never paid it back. Vanessa occupied the pew across the aisle, her husband Dylan at her side, her 23-year-old daughter Emma crying softly into a handkerchief. The Hermes bag at Vanessa's feet probably cost $8,000. Rachel had paid for the startup capital that built the business that bought that bag. The minister concluded with a prayer. Mourners bowed their heads. Rachel remained still, eyes forward, watching the way light moved across the flag on her father's casket. She had requested that flag. She would be the one to receive it, folded into the triangle that turned a symbol into a burden. No one else in this room had earned that right. Movement near the front drew her attention. Gerald Henderson, the family attorney, stood and made his way to the podium with the careful steps of a man carrying bad news. He was 71, silver-haired, with the kind face that made people trust him with their secrets and their estates. Rachel had met him twice, once when she was 12, once 3 weeks ago when she'd called to discuss certain financial arrangements. He'd sounded tired on that call, like a man who discovered something that made him question assumptions he'd held for decades. Henderson adjusted his reading glasses and cleared his throat. The acoustics in the chapel were excellent. Every cough, every shift of fabric, every suppressed sob carried to the vaulted ceiling and back. I want to thank everyone for coming today to honor Thomas Morgan's memory. Before we proceed to the reception, there are some matters related to his estate that require immediate attention. The room stilled. Estate readings didn't usually happen at funerals, but Henderson had insisted. Rachel had agreed. Timing, she'd learned in combat, was everything. During the process of settling Thomas's affairs, some significant financial irregularities came to light. Henderson's voice remained steady, professional, but Rachel could hear the edge underneath. His bank statements show a standard of living that far exceeded his documented income. His pension from the factory was $3,200 monthly. Yet the family home, purchased in 1989 for $260,000, shows as fully paid off as of 2018. Medical expenses over the past decade total $340,000, all paid in full. Educational expenses for his children, specifically Marcus's graduate degree, came to $220,000, also paid. Marcus straightened in his pew. Vanessa's head turned slightly, though she didn't look back. Patricia's crying had stopped. The chapel filled with the particular silence that comes before revelation, the held breath before the blade falls. Henderson continued, his words measured and deliberate. The question is simple. Where did this money come from? Thomas Morgan's financial records show no investment accounts, no stock portfolio, no hidden assets. Patricia Morgan received a modest inheritance from her mother in 2008, $22,000. Between them, their documented income over the past 20 years couldn't have covered these expenses. Yet someone paid them. Someone covered every bill, every loan, every emergency. Someone funded this family's entire life, while they believed they were funding it themselves. The silence deepened. Rachel could feel the question forming in every mind, the confusion spreading like water finding cracks in stone. Patricia's voice broke first, thin and uncertain. I don't understand. If Thomas didn't pay these things, then who did? Rachel's phone vibrated against her hip. Twice, the pattern that meant classified communication. She pulled it out just enough to see the screen. Her executive officer, Ma'am, Joint Chiefs briefing moved to 1400. SECDEF attending. Your presence required. She silenced it with one motion and returned it to her pocket. The Secretary of Defense would have to wait. Some operations couldn't be delegated. Henderson's eyes found hers across the 30 feet of polished pews and grief-stunned faces. The question I'm about to ask may seem unusual, but the paper trail leads to only one conclusion. Colonel Morgan, do you have any information about these payments? The title landed like a grenade. Colonel, not Rachel, not the youngest daughter, not the family disappointment who'd wasted her life in the military. Colonel Morgan. Head swiveled. Her mother's mouth opened slightly. Marcus turned fully in his seat, his expression shifting from confusion to something harder to read. Vanessa stared, and for the first time in perhaps a decade, Rachel saw actual surprise on her sister's face. Rachel stood, the movement precise and controlled. 24 years of military bearing didn't allow for hesitation or uncertainty. She adjusted her white cover, the dress cap that marked her rank, and met Henderson's gaze with the same steady calm she'd used to brief generals and senators. I have a briefing at the Pentagon at 1400 hours. I need to leave. The chapel erupted in low murmurs. Patricia half rose from her seat. Rachel, wait, please. Do you know something about your father's finances? Marcus found his voice, and it came out sharp with an edge of accusation. You can't just drop a bomb like that and walk out. If you know something, you need to tell us right now. Rachel's gaze moved across her family, her mother clutching her tissue, her brother in his expensive suit bought with bonuses earned from other people's money, her sister, whose entire empire rested on a foundation Rachel had paid for without acknowledgement or thanks. She thought about 20 years of silence, 20 years of watching them congratulate themselves on achievements built with her money, 20 years of being invisible while her bank account kept them visible. The rage was there, controlled and cold, a weapon she'd learned to wield with the same precision she brought to everything else. Yes, I know. Her voice carried to every corner of the chapel, calm and clear and absolutely final. But you're right about one thing, Marcus. This isn't the time or place for that conversation. Vanessa stood now too, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor. When is the time? We deserve answers. Dad just died and you're talking about secret payments and military briefings like this is some kind of game? Rachel felt something shift in her chest. A door closing on whatever remained of the person who used to care what her family thought of her. Deserve. Interesting choice of words. She moved down the aisle, boot heels striking marble with military rhythm. Every step pulled focus, drew eyes, commanded space in a way that had nothing to do with rank and everything to do with the kind of authority that came from making decisions that kept people alive or got them killed. She passed her family without slowing, past the rows of distant cousins and old factory friends who'd known her father, past the minister who'd eulogized a man he'd never really known. At the chapel doors, she paused, turned back. Her family stood in various stages of shock and confusion, frozen in the middle of their grief and their questions. The afternoon sun through the western windows threw long shadows across the pews, turning the whole scene into something theatrical and strange. The funeral reception is at Vanessa's house at 4 o'clock. I'll be there at 5:30. If you want answers, that's when you'll get them. Rachel, please. Patricia's voice cracked on the words. Your father just died. Can't we deal with this later? Rachel's hand rested on the heavy wooden door. We've been dealing with this later for 20 years, Mom. Today is when later runs out. She pushed through the doors into California sunshine, leaving her family and their questions in the chapel with the flag-draped casket of a man who died thinking he'd been self-sufficient, never knowing his daughter had been carrying him the entire time. The drive from Ocean View Memorial to Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego took 14 minutes in light traffic. Rachel made it in 12, her hand steady on the wheel of the Honda CR-V that her family assumed was all she could afford. The SUV was 8 years old, practical, unremarkable, exactly what a junior military officer struggling on government pay might drive. She'd bought it specifically for that reason, the same way she'd bought the small apartment in Normal Heights that she listed as her address on official forms and family correspondence. The apartment was real. She owned it outright. She just didn't live there. The guard at the main gate saluted as her vehicle approached. She returned it, waited for the barrier to rise, drove through onto the base she'd commanded for the past 3 years. 5,000 recruits passed through these gates every year. Civilians transformed into Marines through 13 weeks of controlled violence and deliberate breaking. She knew every square foot of the 600 acres, every range and barracks and training ground. This was where she lived now, in the reality of command and consequence, not in the careful fiction she'd maintained for her family. Her office occupied the second floor of the headquarters building, windows overlooking the parade deck where generations of Marines had learned to march in formation. Her executive officer, Major Chen, stood when she entered, his expression carefully neutral. Ma'am, my condolences about your father. Thank you, Major. What's the situation with the Joint Chiefs brief? SecDef's office pushed it to 1600 to accommodate your travel. They've arranged a video conference from here if you can't make it to Washington. His eyes flickered to her dress blues, the medals, the obvious evidence of where she'd been. Your intelligence summary on the Taiwan situation is solid. They just want your threat assessment in person. Rachel moved to her desk, began the familiar process of transformation, removing the cover, unbuttoning the dress blouse to reveal the olive undershirt beneath, pulling the service uniform from the small closet where it waited for exactly these transitions. Some Marines kept photos on their desks, personal touches that marked the space as theirs. Rachel kept maps, threat assessments, and a single-framed image of the Recruit Depot parade deck at dawn, empty and waiting. Tell them I'll be ready at 1600. Full presentation, 20 minutes, Q&A to follow. She paused, dress blues folded with precision across her arm. And Major, I need you to pull some files for me. Personal matter. His eyebrows rose fractionally. Of course, ma'am. What files? Everything we have on financial disclosure requirements for immediate family members of personnel with TS/SCI clearance. Specifically, the protocols for investigating potential security risks related to undisclosed financial connections. Chen's expression didn't change, but Rachel saw the understanding dawn behind his eyes. He'd been her XO for 18 months, long enough to know she didn't make requests like this casually. I'll have them within the hour, ma'am. The video conference's 1600 went exactly as expected. Rachel presented her intelligence assessment on Chinese naval movements near Taiwan, with the same controlled precision she brought to everything. Clear data, logical analysis, actionable recommendations. The Secretary of Defense asked 3 questions. She answered all 3 with specificity that came from 15 years of studying Pacific theater operations. When it ended, the SCECDEF's Chief of Staff sent a brief message. Excellent work, Colonel. Promotion board meets in January. Your name is at the top of the list. Brigadier General, 1 star. At 42, she'd be the youngest female general officer in Marine Corps history. The news should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like another medal to pin on the dress blues her family had never bothered to look at closely enough to understand what they meant. She changed into civilian clothes for the drive to La Jolla. Dark slacks, white blouse, minimal jewelry. The transformation was deliberate. When she walked into Vanessa's house, She wanted them to see Rachel the person, not Colonel Morgan the military officer. They'd spent 20 years not seeing the uniform. She wouldn't hide behind it now. The house stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Spanish colonial architecture wrapped in bougainvillea and money, worth somewhere north of $4.8 million, according to the real estate websites Rachel had checked years ago when Vanessa first bought it. The gate stood open for the funeral reception. Rachel drove through, parked her Honda between a Porsche Taycan and a Range Rover that cost more than most Marines made in 3 years. Music and conversation drifted from the open doors, the sounds of people processing grief through small talk and alcohol. She sat in her car for 30 seconds, breathing the way she'd learned in combat, centering herself for an operation that would require more control than most firefights. Then she picked up the manila folder from her passenger seat, 20 years of financial records reduced to paper and ink, and walked toward the voices. The house opened into a great room with 20-foot ceilings and windows that turned the Pacific into living art. 50 people milled through the space, balancing wine glasses and small plates, speaking in the subdued tones appropriate to mourning. Rachel recognized most of them. Her father's old colleagues, distant relatives, her mother's book club friends, the people who'd known Thomas Morgan as a solid man who'd built a good life through hard work and discipline. None of them knew the truth. By the end of tonight, some of them would. Patricia sat on a white sofa near the fireplace, surrounded by concerned friends. Her eyes found Rachel immediately, tracked her movement through the room with an expression Rachel couldn't quite read. Fear, maybe, or anticipation, or the particular dread that came from knowing something was about to change and being powerless to stop it. Marcus appeared at Rachel's elbow, his jacket removed, his tie loosened, a scotch in one hand. His cologne was expensive and too strong. "We need to talk, now, before you say anything to Mom." Rachel kept moving toward the kitchen. "We'll talk with everyone, Marcus. I'm not doing this in pieces." He grabbed her arm, not hard, but enough to stop her momentum. His face was flushed, whether from alcohol or anger she couldn't tell. "You embarrassed us at the funeral, walking out like that, making cryptic statements about Dad's finances. Whatever point you're trying to make, this isn't how you do it." She looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face with the kind of calm that preceded violence. "You have 3 seconds to remove your hand." He released her, stepped back, held up both hands in a gesture of peace. "Jesus, Rachel, I'm trying to help you here. If you're in some kind of financial trouble, if you borrowed money you can't pay back, we can figure it out as a family. But showing up in your military costume and acting like you're running some kind of operation." Rachel's laugh cut him off, short and sharp and utterly without humor. "My military costume. That's what you think this is?" Vanessa emerged from a cluster of guests, her grief makeup perfectly intact, her hair still salon fresh despite 6 hours since the funeral. She'd changed into black Armani, understated and elegant. "Rachel, we're all very confused about what happened at the chapel. Gerald said some things that didn't make sense, about money and payments. We'd like to understand what he was talking about." The conversations around them had started to quiet, people sensing confrontation the way animals sense weather changes. Rachel felt the weight of attention shifting toward their small family drama, the way focus tightened on a target before engagement. "Is there somewhere private we can talk?" Rachel kept her voice low, controlled. "This isn't a conversation for an audience." Patricia stood from the sofa, moved toward them with the careful steps of someone navigating uncertain ground. Her friends melted away, suddenly very interested in the catering table. "Whatever you need to say, Rachel, just say it. We're all family here." Rachel looked at her mother, 68 years old, wearing grief like a designer label, surrounded by the trappings of a comfortable life she'd never questioned the source of. The woman who told her daughter at 22 that the Naval Academy was a waste of time, who'd skipped her commissioning to attend Marcus's investment banking orientation, who'd called her military service a phase well into Rachel's second decade of command, the woman who'd sent her $2,800 a month for 15 years without ever asking where a junior enlisted Marine got that kind of money. "All right," Rachel set the manila folder on the marble kitchen island. "Let's talk about family." The room had gone completely quiet now, the funeral reception transforming into something else entirely. Rachel opened the folder, pulled out the first document, a spreadsheet she'd compiled over the past 3 weeks, every payment cataloged with dates and amounts and purposes. Dad's mortgage. She pushed the paper toward her mother. Paid off in 2018, total payments made $403,200 over 12 years. Monthly payment $2,800. Source of funds automatic withdrawal from an account held by R. Morgan. Patricia stared at the numbers like they were written in a foreign language. We thought that was from the VA loan program. The bank said we qualified for assistance. There is no VA loan forgiveness program that pays a civilian's entire mortgage. Rachel pulled out another document. Marcus's MBA at Wharton, $220,000 in tuition and expenses, paid in full, 2012 through 2014. Source: wire transfers from an account held by R. Morgan. Marcus's face had gone pale. He set his scotch down carefully, like a man suddenly aware the floor might not be solid. You said that was a loan from Dad's retirement fund. Rachel kept her voice even, factual. The same tone she used for intelligence briefings when the news was bad, but the data was solid. Dad didn't have a retirement fund. His pension from the factory was $3,200 a month. I told you to tell them it was from Dad's investments, so they wouldn't worry about you taking money from their savings. Another document hit the island. Vanessa's real estate startup, $180,000, 2015. Seed capital for La Jolla Luxury Properties. Source: R. Morgan. Vanessa's hand went to her throat, fingers touching the diamond pendant she wore. You told me to consider it an investment. You said you believed in me. I did believe in you. Rachel pulled out 3 more pages, fanned them across the marble. What I didn't believe was that you'd build a $15 million real estate empire and never once think to pay back the woman who made it possible. Or that you'd sit across from me at Thanksgiving and mock my career while wearing jewelry bought with profits from a company I funded. The silence was absolute now, broken only by the distant sound of waves against the cliffs below the house. Every guest, every family friend, every person who'd come to mourn Thomas Morgan now stood frozen, watching the careful architecture of a family's self-mythology collapse into truth and numbers. Rachel wasn't finished. She had 20 years of receipts, and they were all going to see them. Dad's medical expenses, 3 heart procedures over 10 years. Insurance covered about 40%. Total out-of-pocket, $340,000. Paid in full by R. Morgan through a series of checks written directly to Sharp Memorial Hospital. Patricia's hand pressed against her mouth. Tears ran down her face, cutting tracks through her makeup. Thomas said he'd worked out a payment plan with the hospital. He said they'd forgiven most of the debt as charity care. Mom's car in 2016. $32,000 for a Toyota Camry because Dad's truck finally died and the insurance payout wasn't enough. Paid by R. Morgan. Property taxes on the family home. $78,000 over 10 years. Paid annually when Dad claimed he couldn't quite cover it on his pension. All paid by R. Morgan. Emergency loans to Marcus between 2015 and 2022. $95,000 total, requested for various business opportunities and personal emergencies. Never repaid. All from R. Morgan. Marcus made a sound in his throat like he'd been hit. Those were loans. You said they were loans. They were gifts, Marcus. I just called them loans so you'd feel like less of a failure for needing them. Rachel pulled out the final document, the one she'd compiled 3 days ago when she'd finally tallied every transaction, every wire transfer, every check written to keep this family standing, while they congratulated themselves on their self-sufficiency. Emma's college tuition at UC Berkeley, $140,000, 2019 through 2023. Full ride, paid in quarterly installments. Source: R. Morgan Educational Trust. Vanessa's daughter had been standing near the windows, trying to make herself invisible. Now all eyes turned to her. Emma's face crumpled. Aunt Rachel, I didn't know. Mom said it was a scholarship. It was a scholarship. Rachel's voice softened fractionally. I just didn't tell your mother I was the one funding it. I wanted you to have the education you deserved without the debt that would cripple your future. She straightened, looked at the faces around her. Her mother crying, her brother pale and shaking, her sister frozen in expensive clothing bought with money that traced back to Rachel's accounts. The guests had started to back away. Understanding this was too intimate, too raw for outsiders. Total paid over 20 years to support this family's lifestyle, while I maintained the fiction that I was a struggling junior officer making barely enough to survive. $1,488,200. She paused, let that number sink in like water into sand. And until 3 hours ago, when Gerald Henderson uncovered the paper trail while settling Dad's estate, none of you knew, because you never asked. You never looked. You built your entire lives on a foundation I laid in silence, and you never once wondered why your financial miracles kept happening exactly when you needed them. Patricia's voice came out broken, desperate. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you just say something? Rachel felt 20 years of anger crystallize into something clear and cold and absolutely final. Because every time I tried, you cut me off to talk about Marcus's promotion or Vanessa's latest listing. Because when I wore my uniform to family dinners, you asked me when I was going to get a real job. Because when I told you I'd been deployed to Afghanistan, you changed the subject to ask if I'd gained weight. I stopped trying to make you see me, Mom. It was easier to just keep you standing from a distance than to keep begging for acknowledgement up close. The room had emptied except for immediate family and two of her mother's closest friends who seemed unable to move. Rachel gathered her documents back into the folder with precise movements. Marcus found his voice, though it came out rough and uncertain. What do you want from us? An apology? Repayment? What's the price for all this? Rachel looked at her brother, 45 years old, wearing a suit that cost more than a private's monthly pay, holding expensive scotch in a house built on money he'd never questioned the source of. She felt nothing. No anger, no love, no residual affection for the child he'd been before they'd all learned to be disappointed in each other. Just the cold assessment that came from years of evaluating threats and deciding which ones deserved her limited resources. I don't want anything from you, Marcus. I stopped needing anything from this family around the same time I made lieutenant colonel. What I want is for you to understand something very simple. Love without respect is just pity dressed up as obligation. And I'm done being pied. She turned to leave. Her mother's voice stopped her, desperate and pleading in a way Patricia Morgan had never sounded in Rachel's memory. Please don't go, not like this. We made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can be better. Rachel paused at the edge of the great room, looked back at the wreckage of the funeral reception, the abandoned wine glasses and catering platters, the shell-shocked faces of people who'd thought they knew what family meant. Her phone buzzed again. The Joint Chiefs wanted her threat assessment expanded to include North Korean submarine movements. The world kept turning, kept demanding her attention and expertise, while her family fell apart over revelations that should have been obvious years ago. I spent 20 years being better, Mom. I was better when I paid Dad's mortgage while you told me I was wasting my life. I was better when I funded Marcus's education while he mocked my career. I was better when I launched Vanessa's business while she introduced me as her disappointing sister who couldn't hold down a real job. I don't need to be better anymore. What I need is for you to finally see me as I actually am, not as the failure you needed me to be to feel successful yourselves. The silence stretched. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 6 times. Rachel walked toward the door, her boots silent on the expensive flooring Vanessa had installed with profits from a company Rachel had made possible. Patricia's voice followed her, broken and small. Who are you, Rachel? Rachel stopped, turned, met her mother's eyes across the wreckage of their family mythology. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the weight of 24 years of service, 6 combat deployments, and enough classified briefings to understand exactly how much of the world operated on necessary fictions. I'm Colonel Rachel Morgan, United States Marine Corps. I command Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego. I hold top secret/sensitive compartmented information clearance with special access programs. I brief the Secretary of Defense on threats to national security. I've served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and the Horn of Africa. I've called in airstrikes, coordinated special operations, and made decisions that determined whether people lived or died. I make $185,000 annually, and I'm worth $2.4 million. I own 4 properties, including the beach cottage in Carlsbad that was in the envelope Dad never bothered to open at Thanksgiving. And until today, you thought I was a clerk making $35,000 and renting a studio apartment because that's all you ever bothered to know about me. She walked out into California twilight, leaving her family with truth they'd spent 20 years being too comfortable to discover, too certain to question, too self-satisfied to see. The Honda started with its usual reliable purr. Rachel sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, breathing the way she'd learned in combat when the mission was complete, but the cost was still being tallied. Her phone showed 17 missed calls, 5 from her mother, 7 from Marcus, 3 from Vanessa, 2 from numbers she didn't recognize. She turned it off completely, something she never did, and drove toward the only home that mattered. The cottage in Carlsbad sat 50 yards from the beach, a small craftsman-style house she'd bought 5 years ago and renovated slowly, room by room, into exactly what she wanted. 2 bedrooms, 1 office, an open kitchen that faced the ocean. The deed had been in the envelope at Thanksgiving, a gift to her parents, a retirement home steps from the water, where her father could have spent his final years watching surfers and pelicans instead of dying of a heart attack in the driveway of a house she'd paid for. They'd never opened it. She'd taken the envelope back, filed the deed in her safety deposit box, and written it off as another gesture that disappeared into the careful blindness her family had perfected. Now it was hers again, just hers. No ghosts of ungiven gifts, no weight of invisible generosity. She walked down to the beach in the dark, boots in one hand, letting the Pacific Ocean roll over her feet in waves that had no agenda, no judgment, no carefully constructed mythology about who she should be or what her service was worth. The water was cold, the sand was solid, the stars overhead existed without needing her permission or understanding. For the first time in 20 years, she felt the weight of performance lift from her shoulders. Her phone, still off in her pocket, held all the questions her family would keep asking until they understood that silence wasn't absence. Silence was choice, and Rachel had spent long enough choosing to be invisible. Tomorrow she would return their calls. Tomorrow she would brief the Joint Chiefs on submarine movements in waters most Americans couldn't find on a map. Tomorrow she would continue being Colonel Rachel Morgan, commander of 5,000 Marines, guardian of a country that would never know her name. But tonight, she was just a woman on a beach in California, watching waves in the dark, finally free of the weight of being unseen. The text messages started at 0547, before sunrise had cleared the eastern hills behind Carlsbad. Rachel woke to the vibration of her phone on the nightstand, the screen lighting up the bedroom in pulses. Patricia, please call me. We need to talk. Marcus, this is insane. You owe us an explanation. Vanessa, how dare you humiliate us like that in front of everyone? Emma, Aunt Rachel, I'm so confused. Can we please talk? Rachel silenced the phone without reading further. Through the bedroom window, the Pacific stretched dark and endless under pre-dawn stars. She'd slept 4 hours, dreamless and complete. The kind of sleep that came after operations concluded successfully regardless of casualties. Her dress blues hung on the closet door where she'd left them, metals catching faint light from the hallway. Today she'd wear her service uniform, woodland camouflage, boots, the working clothes of someone who didn't have time for performance. The run along the beach cleared her head. 5 miles at a pace that would have impressed the recruits at MCRD, sand firm under her feet, waves providing rhythm. By the time she returned to the cottage, showered and dressed, the sun had broken over the coastal hills, and her phone showed 43 missed calls. She turned it off again. There were protocols for this kind of situation, lessons learned from decades of managing crises. First rule, control the information flow. Second rule, don't respond to chaos with more chaos. Third rule, make them come to you on your terms, your timeline, your ground. Her actual phone, the classified one issued by the Pentagon, had exactly 2 messages. Major Chen, ma'am, promotion board results are in. Call me when you can. Admiral Patterson, Colonel Morgan, need your input on Pacific Fleet reorganization. No rush. Both messages were professional, contained. Exactly what she expected from people who understood that personal drama didn't stop the world from turning. She called Chen first. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. Congratulations, ma'am. Brigadier General, effective January 15th. Ceremony scheduled for February. His voice carried genuine pleasure, the kind that came from watching someone earn something through merit rather than connections. She thanked him, asked about the morning's training schedule, reminded him about the recruits graduating Friday. When she hung up, she sat for a moment with the phone in her hand, staring at the ocean. 1 star. General officer. At 42, she'd beaten every timeline, shattered every glass ceiling, achieved what most officers spent 30 years pursuing. And the only people who should have cared were too busy being angry that she'd stopped pretending to be poor. The classified phone rang again. Emma's name appeared on screen. Not the family iPhone, but the number Rachel had given her niece 2 years ago with specific instructions. For emergencies only. Real emergencies, not drama. Emma had never used it before. Rachel answered. Emma's voice came through shaky but determined. Aunt Rachel, I know you probably don't want to talk to anyone right now, but I need to see you. Not about Mom or Uncle Marcus or any of their stuff. About me. Please. The cottage. 1 hour. Come alone. Emma arrived in 58 minutes, driving a 6-year-old Honda Civic that Rachel recognized as the car she'd helped buy when Emma graduated high school. The girl, no, woman now, 23 and recently graduated from Berkeley with a degree in international relations, climbed out wearing jeans and a Cal sweatshirt, her face scrubbed clean of makeup, her eyes red from crying or lack of sleep or both. They sat on the deck overlooking the beach, coffee between them, morning sun warming the weathered wood. Emma didn't speak immediately, just stared at the ocean like she was gathering courage from the horizon. I need to understand something. Emma's hands wrapped around her mug, knuckles white. My entire college education, 4 years at Berkeley, room, board, tuition, books, everything, that was you? Yes. Mom told me it was a merit scholarship from the university. She showed me letters, official-looking documents. Was any of that real? The scholarship was real. The university just didn't know I was the one funding it. I set it up through an educational trust, made it look like it came from a veterans foundation. Your mother received the award letters and assumed they were legitimate institutional aid. So she lied to me. She believed what she needed to believe. Rachel kept her voice neutral, factual. It's easier to accept good fortune as earned rather than question where it came from. Emma's laugh came out bitter. Too old for 23. Like how Grandpa believed his mortgage was paid through some VA program. Like how Uncle Marcus thought his MBA tuition came from Grandpa's investments. Like how everyone in this family has been living on your money while thinking they earned it themselves. The assessment was harsh and accurate. Rachel said nothing. Let the silence confirm what Emma had already figured out. I always wondered why you never came to family dinners. Emma's eyes finally met Rachel's, and there was something fierce burning there. Something that reminded Rachel of herself at that age. Why you always left early, why you never talked about your work, why everyone treated you like you were failing at life when you seemed so together. I thought maybe you were just weird, military weird, but it wasn't that at all. What was it? You were protecting yourself from us, from having to watch your family congratulate themselves on success you paid for. Emma set down her coffee with careful precision. That must have been exhausting. Rachel felt something crack in her chest, a small fissure in the armor she'd maintained for 20 years. This was the question no one else had asked. Not are you crazy, not how dare you, not what do you want from us. Just recognition that pretending to be invisible while carrying everyone's weight might have cost something. Yes, it was exhausting. The admission hung between them like smoke, visible and impossible to take back. Emma nodded slowly, her expression shifting from anger to something more complex. Mom called me last night, 37 times. Uncle Marcus showed up at my apartment at midnight demanding to know if I'd talk to you. Grandma keeps texting asking me to mediate because I'm the youngest and you always liked me. Her voice turned sharp. But that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to convince you to forgive them or explain yourself or make this easier for anyone. Why are you here? Because I need to know if everything I've accomplished is real. Emma's hands shook. I graduated summa cum laude. I got accepted to Georgetown for my master's in international security. I have a job offer from the State Department starting in June. But if all of that was only possible because you paid for Berkeley, then how much of my success is actually mine? Rachel stood, moved to the deck railing, watch surfers paddling out through morning waves. This was the question that mattered, the one that could either poison Emma's future or clarify it. She thought about all the ways she could answer, all the comforting lies she could tell. Instead, she chose truth. I paid your tuition. I didn't take your exams, write your papers, or earn your grades. I didn't get you accepted to Georgetown or land you that State Department offer. Money opened a door. You walked through it and built something. Those are separate things. But without the money, you would have gone to a state school on loans, worked 3 jobs, graduated with debt, and probably still ended up in the same place because you're smart and driven and competent. It would have taken longer and been harder, but you would have made it. Emma turned to look at her aunt, uncertainty written across her face. Rachel continued, her voice carrying the weight of conviction earned through decades of watching people succeed or fail, based on character rather than circumstance. I didn't give you ability. I gave you time and space to develop the ability you already had. There's a difference. How do you know? How can you be sure I would have made it without your help? Because I did. Rachel's voice went quiet, harder. I went to the Naval Academy on a full scholarship I earned through grades and athletics. I paid my own way through officer candidate school, through every deployment, through every promotion. Nobody gave me anything except the opportunity to prove myself. And I watched hundreds of Marines do the same. Take the smallest chance and turn it into a career, a life, a future. Money helps, but it doesn't create character. It just reveals what was already there. Emma sat with that for a long moment, her breathing steady, her eyes focused on something internal. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, firmed up. I want to pay you back. No. Aunt Rachel, I can't just... You can, and you will. Rachel turned from the railing, met her niece's eyes directly. Paying me back makes this a transaction. It makes your education something you owe me for instead of something you earned. I don't want your money, Emma. I want you to take what you learned and use it to do something that matters. That's how you pay this forward, not back. The distinction landed. Emma nodded slowly, but her jaw remained tight with something unresolved. There's something else. I need to know about Mom and Uncle Marcus. What Gerald Henderson said at the funeral about Dad's estate and the money irregularities. How bad is it? Rachel considered how much to share, how much Emma needed to know versus how much would simply burden her with her family's failures. But Emma was 23, educated, about to start a career in international security. She deserved truth, not protection. Your mother built her real estate empire on $180,000 I gave her in 2015. She told me it was a loan. She's never paid back a dollar. Her company is worth about $15 million on paper, but she's leveraged it 8-to-1 and has $380,000 in tax liens she's fighting. The IRS is building a case that could result in them seizing assets, including potentially your grandparents' house, since some of her business debt is entangled with their property. Emma's face went white. Mom told me business was great. She just bought a new Range Rover last month. That's the problem. She's spending like she's successful while drowning in debt she can't acknowledge. Rachel pulled her phone from her pocket, opened a financial database she had access to through her security clearances, showed Emma the screen. These are public records, tax liens, lawsuit filings, business debt. Your mother is 6 months from bankruptcy if she doesn't restructure. And Uncle Marcus? Worse. The SEC is investigating him for insider trading. He moved $2.1 million through offshore accounts in the Caymans. The FBI has been building a case for 8 months. He's looking at federal charges unless he cooperates and returns the money. Emma's breath came out shaky. Does Grandma know? Not yet. She will soon. Federal investigators will interview family members as part of the background check for my promotion. That's when everything comes out. My real career, my clearances, my net worth, and the fact that I've been the family's financial foundation for 20 years while they built their lives on top of mine. So this whole thing, the confrontation at the funeral, all of it, that was you controlling when the truth came out instead of letting investigators reveal it? Rachel nodded. Better they hear it from me in private than from federal agents asking why their daughter never disclosed her actual income and security clearances to her family. Emma stood, paced the deck, processed information that was rewriting her understanding of everyone she trusted. When she stopped, she faced Rachel with an expression that looked startlingly adult. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing. You're not responsible for your mother's choices or your uncle's crimes. But I can help." Emma's voice carried sudden determination. "I'm starting at State in June. International Security Division. I'll be working with people who interface with DoD, intelligence community, all of it. Let me learn from you. Teach me how to do this right, how to serve without needing credit, how to be competent without being loud, how to build something real." Rachel studied her niece, saw something there that reminded her of herself at that age. Hungry, determined, willing to work for meaning instead of applause. This was what she'd hoped for when she'd funded Emma's education. Not gratitude, not repayment, but the continuation of values that mattered. All right, but this isn't mentoring by phone calls and coffee. If you want to learn what I do, you need to see it. Rachel pulled out her phone, sent a text to Major Chen. "I'm bringing you to the recruit depot tomorrow, 0600. You'll shadow me for a full day of command operations. You'll see what military leadership actually looks like. Not the Hollywood version. It's going to be boring, exhausting, and unglamorous. Still interested?" Emma's smile broke through the tension like sunrise. "Absolutely." They talked for another hour about what Emma's job at State would involve, about the realities of government service, about the difference between power and authority. Rachel found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. The weight of commanding people who might die following her orders. The loneliness of being the only woman in rooms full of men who assumed she'd slept her way to the table. The quiet satisfaction of doing work that mattered even when no one knew your name. Emma listened with the focused intensity of someone who understood that she was receiving something rare and valuable. When Emma finally left, driving her Honda back toward whatever confrontation awaited her with her mother, Rachel stood on the deck and watched the ocean. One person from her family had asked the right questions, shown up for the right reasons, wanted the right things. Maybe that was enough. Maybe one person seeing you clearly was worth 20 years of being invisible to everyone else. Her civilian phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on after Emma left. The messages had multiplied exponentially. But one stood out, different from the demanding texts and angry voicemails. "Gerald Henderson. Colonel Morgan, I have information about your father's estate that requires immediate discussion. This affects the other family members' legal standing. Please call at your earliest convenience." Rachel called. Henderson answered on the first ring, his voice carrying the particular tension of a lawyer about to deliver news that would complicate everything. "Colonel, thank you for calling back. I've been going through your father's complete financial history for the estate settlement. There are some issues that need to be addressed before I can close probate." "What kind of issues?" "The mortgage payments you made over 12 years. They were never disclosed on your father's tax returns as gifts. The IRS has a gift tax exemption of $15,000 per year per person. You were paying $2,800 monthly, which is $33,600 annually. That's $18,000 over the exemption limit. Times 12 years equals $216,000 in undisclosed gifts." Rachel's jaw tightened. "I paid the mortgage company directly. The payments didn't go through Dad's accounts." "Doesn't matter. The IRS considers mortgage payments on someone else's property to be gifts in kind. Your father should have reported them. He didn't. Neither did you on your financial disclosure forms. Because I structured them to look like they came from a loan modification program, which is technically fraud." Henderson's voice carried no judgment, just legal reality. "I'm obligated to report this to the IRS as part of the estate settlement. Once I do, they'll investigate. Your family members will face tax penalties and interest on the unreported gifts. It could be substantial." "How substantial?" "Conservatively, $250,000 in back taxes and penalties. Maybe more if they determine it was intentional evasion rather than oversight." Rachel closed her eyes, calculated. She'd spent 20 years keeping her family financially stable. Now the same generosity that had saved them was about to bury them in debt they couldn't pay. The irony was almost beautiful. What about the payments to Marcus and Vanessa? The education funding, the business loans? Same issue. All over the gift tax limit, none reported. The IRS could go after them individually for their shares. Henderson paused. "Colonel, I need to be direct with you. If I file this estate settlement accurately, your entire family is going to face federal tax investigations. The penalties could bankrupt your mother, destroy what's left of Marcus's finances, and push Vanessa's already struggling business into complete collapse. And if you don't file accurately, then I'm committing a felony and risking my license. I won't do that. Rachel respected that. Henderson was doing his job, following the law, refusing to be complicit in the kind of comfortable fiction her family had built their lives on. She would have done the same. File accurately. Whatever consequences come from that, my family will have to handle. Colonel, with respect, these are your parents, your siblings. This will destroy them financially. They destroyed themselves by never asking where the money came from. I just provided the rope. They chose to hang themselves with it. Henderson was quiet for a long moment. There is one option. If you formally gift them enough money to cover the tax penalties and structure it properly going forward, the IRS might be willing to settle for a reduced penalty. You'd essentially be paying for the privilege of having helped your family. How much? $400,000, maybe more. Rachel thought about her net worth. $2.4 million, built over 24 years of service, deployments, careful investing. $400,000 would hurt but not cripple her. She could write the check today and still have enough for her own retirement, her own future. It would be the easiest solution, the path of least resistance. No. Colonel. Number. Let the investigation proceed. Let them face the consequences of building a life on money they never questioned. Maybe that's the only way they'll finally understand what I've been carrying. She hung up, sat down on the deck steps, and let herself feel the weight of what she'd just done. This wasn't cruelty. This was the same thing she'd done for 24 years in the Marines, creating situations where people either rose to meet the challenge or failed and learned from it. Her family had spent 2 decades failing to see her. Now they'd spend the next few years learning to see themselves. The afternoon brought more visitors. Marcus showed up at 1600, driving his Porsche through the quiet Carlsbad neighborhood like he owned it. Rachel watched from the window as he climbed out, straightened his suit jacket, walked to her door with the confidence of someone who expected to be let in. She didn't answer his knock. "Rachel, I know you're in there. Your car's in the driveway. We need to talk." She remained silent, watching him through the curtain. This was what she'd learned in combat. Sometimes the most powerful action was no action at all. Let the enemy exhaust themselves against your position. Wait them out. Marcus knocked harder. "Come on, this is ridiculous. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Now, can we please act like adults and figure this out?" Still nothing. "Fine." His voice rose, anger breaking through the reasonable facade. "You want to play games? I've got a lawyer looking into those payments you made. If you structured them to avoid taxes, that's fraud. You could lose your clearance, your career, everything. So maybe you should think about that before you get self-righteous about family." Rachel smiled. He was threatening her with exactly the investigation Gerald Henderson had just explained would destroy him, not her. The payments had been gifts, legal if properly reported. The failure to report them fell on the recipients, not the giver. Marcus was smart enough to know this if he actually consulted a lawyer instead of bluffing. She stepped to the door, opened it just enough to be seen. Marcus's expression shifted from anger to something more uncertain when he saw her face. "You're right. I should think about consequences." Rachel's voice carried ice. "So should you. The FBI has been building an insider trading case against you for 8 months, $2.1 million through Cayman accounts. They have documentation, wire transfers, trading patterns that exactly match classified information you had access to through your firm's corporate clients. When they arrest you, and they will, you'll have a choice. Cooperate and return the money, maybe serve 18 months in minimum security, or fight it and spend 5 to 7 years in federal prison." Marcus went pale. "How do you know that?" "Because the FBI's Financial Crimes Division consulted naval intelligence on the international banking trail. Your name came up. I recused myself from the case, obviously. But I've seen enough to know you're done. The only question is how much time you do." You can't." Marcus's confidence crumbled like sand. "You're bluffing." "Call your lawyer. Ask him to check federal court filings in Southern District of New York. Case number pending, investigation ongoing. Your firm's already cooperating. They cut a deal 2 weeks ago. That makes you the loose end." Marcus stumbled backward, his hand reaching for the porch railing for balance. "You're really going to let them arrest me? Your own brother? You're really going to stand there and pretend you're the victim? Rachel's voice went cold. You stole from our parents, Marcus. You took $95,000 they couldn't afford to lend you, money I had to replace so they wouldn't lose their house. You stole $15,000 from the $30,000 I gave you for Dad's heart surgery. And now you come here threatening me with lawyers because I had the audacity to stop pretending you're successful. I didn't know you were paying for everything. If I'd known, you would have what? Borrowed more? Rachel cut him off. You knew exactly what you needed to know. That money appeared when you needed it. Bills got paid when they shouldn't have. Problems disappeared without explanation. You never asked because knowing meant having to acknowledge you weren't the success you pretended to be. Marcus's face twisted with something between rage and desperation. Mom's going to lose the house because of your petty revenge. The IRS is going to come after her for all those unreported gifts. You did this. You're the one destroying this family. I'm the one who stopped holding it together. There's a difference. She closed the door, locked it, walked back to the window, and watched him stand on her porch for another 5 minutes before he finally stumbled back to his car and drove away. Through the window, she could see his hands shaking on the steering wheel. Vanessa arrived 2 hours later, more composed than Marcus, but carrying the same desperation underneath the polished exterior. She knocked once, then called through the door. Rachel, please, I'm not here to fight. I just need to understand what's happening. Rachel opened the door this time, mostly out of curiosity about what approach her sister would take. Vanessa stood in designer athleisure, Lululemon and Tory Burch, the uniform of women who exercised at expensive gyms and had lunch meetings that masqueraded as friendship. Can I come in? No, but we can talk here. Vanessa's composure cracked fractionally. Fine. Look, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. I should have paid you back for the startup capital. I always meant to. But business expenses kept piling up, and I kept thinking next quarter, next year, when the big deal closed. And then it just became this thing I avoided thinking about. Because thinking about it meant acknowledging that your entire empire was built on my foundation. Yes. Vanessa's honesty surprised Rachel. I know that now. Emma came to see me this morning. She told me what you said about my finances, the tax liens, the leverage. She said I'm 6 months from bankruptcy. Are you? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Vanessa's hands twisted together. I've been moving money around, paying one debt with another loan, keeping the appearance of success while everything underneath crumbles. It's exhausting. Rachel recognized the exhaustion in her sister's voice. It was the same weariness she'd felt for 20 years, the burden of maintaining a fiction that required constant energy. The difference was Rachel had been holding other people up while Vanessa had been holding up a lie about herself. What do you want from me? Help! Vanessa's voice broke. I don't know how to fix this. The IRS thing, the business debt, all of it. You're the only person in this family who actually knows how to manage money, how to plan ahead, how to be competent instead of just looking competent. Vanessa flinched but nodded. Yes. Rachel studied her sister, 47 years old, successful on paper, drowning in debt that came from confusing image with substance. There was a lesson here about the difference between wealth and worth, but Vanessa was going to have to learn it the hard way. Declare bankruptcy, restructure your business, sell the house and downsize to something sustainable, take the tax penalty settlement the IRS offers, and get on a payment plan. Stop spending money on appearances and start building something real. I can't declare bankruptcy. Do you know what that would do to my reputation? My clients. Your clients will find other agents. Your reputation will recover. Your integrity won't if you keep lying about your financial situation. Rachel's voice hardened. You have a choice, Vanessa. You can protect your image and lose everything slowly, or you can face reality and rebuild something sustainable. But I'm done being the invisible safety net that lets you avoid consequences. You're really not going to help. I am helping. I'm telling you the truth. What you do with it is your choice. Vanessa's face hardened. Emma told me you're getting promoted. General, how nice for you. I'm sure you'll enjoy the power while the rest of us lose everything. Rachel felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, just the cold assessment that came from watching someone choose pride over survival. I've had power for 20 years, Vanessa. I just never needed you to see it to know it was real. She closed the door, listened to her sister's footsteps retreat down the walkway, The car door slam, the engines start and fade. Two siblings confronted, two chances for redemption offered and refused. Maybe Emma was the only one who'd inherited anything worth saving. The sun set over the Pacific in colors that didn't care about human drama, gold and orange and purple bleeding into darkness. Rachel sat on her deck, classified phone in hand, reviewing intelligence briefings for tomorrow's Joint Chiefs presentation. Chinese submarine movements, North Korean missile tests, Russian naval exercises in the Arctic. The world kept turning, kept presenting threats that required analysis and response, while her family fell apart over revelations that shouldn't have been revelations at all. Her civilian phone rang. Patricia, her mother, the woman who'd given birth to her, raised her, loved her in the abstract way parents love children they don't actually know. Rachel almost didn't answer. But there were things that needed to be said, conversations that couldn't be avoided forever. Mom, Patricia's voice came through thick with tears. Please come home. Please. We need to talk about this as a family. There is no home, Mom. There's your house that I paid for and my house that I built myself. Those are different things. Don't do this. Don't shut us out. We made mistakes, but we're still your family. Rachel watched waves roll in through darkness, white foam visible in starlight. Family. The word that was supposed to mean belonging, but had always felt more like burden. Do you remember my commissioning ceremony? Rachel's voice stayed level, conversational. Naval Academy, 2002. I was 22. Top of my class. About to become a Marine officer. I invited you, Dad, Marcus, Vanessa. You didn't come because Marcus had his investment banking orientation, and you thought that was more important. Patricia's breathing stuttered. We didn't realize how important it was to you. I told you it was the most important day of my life. You said we'd celebrate later. We never did. Rachel continued, each word precise. My first deployment to Iraq, 2003. I sent letters home describing combat operations in terms general enough to pass security review. You wrote back asking if I'd gained weight in the photos. My promotion to captain, to major, to lieutenant colonel. Every single ceremony, I invited you. You came to none of them. But you never missed one of Marcus's client dinners or Vanessa's open houses. We didn't understand what those ceremonies meant, because you never asked. Because understanding would have required seeing me as something other than the daughter who disappointed you by choosing service over success. That's not fair. We never said you disappointed us. You didn't have to say it, Mom. It was in every conversation about my career, every comment about my salary, every suggestion that I get a real job. You built a narrative where I was failing so Marcus and Vanessa could be succeeding. The fact that I was actually more successful than both of them combined would have destroyed that comfortable fiction. Patricia's voice cracked completely. We were wrong. Is that what you want to hear? We were wrong about you. Wrong about what mattered, wrong about everything. But you're our daughter, doesn't that count for something? Rachel felt the question land, felt the weight of it settle in her chest, where all the unresolved childhood needs still lived. Part of her, the part that was still 22 and wanting her parents at her commissioning, wanted to say yes, wanted to forgive and move forward and rebuild something from the wreckage. But she'd learned in combat that wanting something and it being tactically sound were different calculations. It counts for this. I won't let you lose the house. The IRS penalties from the unreported gifts, I'll pay them. Not because you deserve it, but because you're 68 years old and losing your home wouldn't teach you anything except how to be bitter. But that's all I'm giving. The rest, Marcus's legal fees, Vanessa's business debts, the emotional labor of making you feel better about your choices, that's not my burden anymore. Patricia's sob came through the line, raw and desperate. When did you become so cold? I'm not cold, Mom. I'm just finally warm enough to notice how cold you've always been. She ended the call, turned off both phones, sat in darkness listening to the ocean's endless conversation with the shore. Tomorrow she'd brief the Joint Chiefs. Next week she'd have her promotion ceremony. Next month she'd start her new role with enough responsibility to keep her busy for the next decade. The work would continue. The country would need defending. Marines would need leading. And somewhere in all of that, maybe she'd find the space to figure out what she actually wanted now that she'd stopped performing for an audience that never applauded. But tonight, she was done. Done explaining, done justifying, done carrying people who refuse to walk. Tonight she was just a woman on a beach in California, finally free of the weight of being everything to people who saw nothing. The stars overhead wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent and perfect. Rachel watched them until she couldn't keep her eyes open, then went inside to sleep the sleep of someone who'd completed a mission she'd been planning for 20 years. The mission of finally, definitively, absolutely being seen. Emma arrived at Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego at 05:45, 15 minutes early, carrying coffee in a thermos and wearing business casual that would look ridiculous next to actual Marines. Rachel met her at the main gate in woodland camouflage utilities, hair pulled back in a regulation bun, no makeup, no jewelry except her Naval Academy ring. The guard saluted. Rachel returned it with the casual precision of someone who'd made the gesture 10,000 times. "Welcome to my actual life." They walked across the parade deck in pre-dawn darkness, past barracks where recruits were already forming up for morning PT, past ranges where drill instructors were preparing for the day's training. Emma stayed quiet, taking it in, the scale of the operation, the organized chaos of transformation happening on every corner of the 600 acres. "How many people report to you?" "Directly? About 40 officers and senior NCOs. Indirectly? 1,200 permanent staff plus 5,000 recruits annually." Rachel pushed through the doors of the headquarters building, returned salutes from Marines already at work. "We run 13-week cycles. Every graduate who comes out of here has been shaped by decisions I make about training standards, safety protocols, leadership development. If I get it wrong, people die. If I get it right, the Corps gets Marines who can handle anything." Emma followed her into an office that overlooked the grinder, the massive parade deck where formations happened. Maps covered one wall, intelligence briefings covered another. A single photo sat on the desk, the empty parade deck at dawn. The morning unfolded in briefings, inspections, crisis management. A recruit had attempted suicide overnight. Psychiatric evaluation needed, family notification required, investigation into training protocols to ensure nothing had triggered it. A drill instructor was accused of inappropriate conduct with a female recruit. Immediate suspension, NCIS investigation, potential court-martial. Budget documents needed review and signature. Training schedules required adjustment for incoming class sizes. A congressional delegation wanted to visit next month. Security arrangements, protocol briefings, prepared talking points. Emma watched Rachel handle each crisis with the same controlled calm, never raising her voice, never showing uncertainty, making decisions that affected lives and careers, with information that was always incomplete, and timelines that were always urgent. By 1100, Emma looked exhausted just from observing. "How do you do this every day?" "You find what matters and you protect it. Everything else is just noise." At 1300, Rachel had Emma shadow her through a training observation. They stood on a range where recruits were qualifying with rifles, drill instructors barking corrections, the crack of gunfire echoing across the facility. One recruit, 19, maybe 20, face tight with concentration, missed his target repeatedly. His DI was in his face, volume escalating, frustration evident. Rachel stepped in. The DI came to attention immediately. "Ma'am." "What's his name?" "Private Rodriguez, ma'am." Rachel moved to Rodriguez, her voice dropping to conversational. "Show me your sight picture." The kid demonstrated, hands shaking. Rachel adjusted his grip fractionally, corrected his stance, explained breathing rhythm in terms that made sense. Rodriguez fired, hit center mass, fired again. Another hit. His face transformed from panic to possibility. "You're not failing because you're incompetent. You're failing because nobody explained it in a way you could understand. Try again." Rodriguez qualified on his next attempt. Rachel walked away without waiting for thanks, because the outcome was the point, not the recognition. Emma had been filming on her phone. She stopped recording when Rachel glanced at her. That's what leadership looks like. Not speeches, not inspiration, just competence applied to the specific problem in front of you. They ate lunch in the chow hall with Marines, who treated Rachel with casual respect, jokes, stories, questions about her opinion on upcoming policy changes. Emma noticed how Rachel listened more than she talked, how she remembered names and details about people's families, how she commanded through presence rather than performance. By 1600, Emma was done. Rachel drove her back to the main gate, let her process everything she'd seen. Still want to work in government service? More than ever. Emma's voice carried certainty. But I understand now what you meant about silence being choice. You don't need to announce what you do because the work speaks for itself. Rachel nodded. That's the first real thing you've learned. Most people spend their careers trying to be seen. The ones who matter spend their careers trying to be effective. Those are different goals. Emma left. Rachel returned to her office, finished the day's paperwork, reviewed intelligence assessments for tomorrow's video conference with Pacific Fleet Command. The sun set over the Pacific visible through her window. Another day complete. Another set of decisions made that would ripple forward in ways she'd never know. Her classified phone rang at 18:30. Admiral Patterson. Colonel Morgan, congratulations are in order. The promotion board made it official today. Brigadier General, effective February 1st. Ceremony scheduled for February 15th at the Pentagon. You'll need to bring family for the oath and pinning. Rachel felt the weight of it settle. Not joy exactly, but satisfaction. 24 years of work crystallizing into a moment she'd earned through competence rather than connections. Thank you, sir. I'll make arrangements. One more thing. We want you for the DIA position after all, Deputy Director for Defense Intelligence. The SECDEF is pushing hard for you. It's a 2-star track, Rachel. You play this right. You could be running the entire intelligence community in 10 years. She thought about what that meant. More responsibility, more pressure, more decisions that affected national security. More time away from the family she'd just spent months confronting. More years of service that required everything she had. I'm honored, sir. When do they need an answer? You just gave it. Welcome to the intelligence community's senior leadership, General. The call ended. Rachel sat in her office overlooking the grinder, watching evening formations, thinking about the path that had brought her here and the path that stretched ahead. 1 star today, maybe 2 in a few years, maybe more after that. All of it earned, none of it given. Her civilian phone showed a message from Patricia. Please let us come to the ceremony. Please. We want to see you receive what you've earned. Rachel stared at the message for a long time before responding. You can come. But this isn't about us. This is about the Marines I've served with and the mission I've served. If you come to witness, not to be witnessed. Patricia's response came immediately. We'll be there. Thank you. February 15th arrived cold and clear in Washington, D.C. Rachel flew in the night before, stayed in base lodging at Quantico, avoided her family's attempts to have dinner or drinks or any kind of reunion before the ceremony. She'd agreed they could attend. She hadn't agreed to perform emotional labor around their attendance. The Pentagon's Hall of Heroes filled with 200 people by 0900. Senior military officers in dress uniforms, intelligence community leaders in suits, members of Congress from the Armed Services Committees, Marines she'd served with across 2 decades. And in the front row, looking small and uncertain, Patricia, Marcus, Vanessa, Emma. Rachel stood backstage in her dress blues, medals polished, ribbons aligned, monsieur, the weight of 24 years of service displayed across her chest. Major Chen appeared at her elbow. Ma'am, they're ready for you. She walked onto the stage to applause, took her position at attention, faced Admiral Patterson and the Secretary of Defense. The ceremony proceeded with military precision. Citations read, accomplishments cataloged, the transformation from colonel to brigadier general marked by a 1-star rank being pinned to her shoulders. Admiral Patterson administered the oath. Rachel repeated words she'd first spoken at 22, fresh from the academy, innocent of what they would cost. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. The star went onto her shoulder. The room erupted in applause. Rachel saluted the SECDEF, the admiral, the flag. When she turned to face the audience, she saw her family crying. Patricia with her face in her hands, Marcus pale and shaking, Vanessa gripping Emma's arm like she might fall without support. The reception afterward transformed the ceremonial space into something more human. Rachel moved through clusters of colleagues, accepted congratulations, discussed the DIA position with intelligence officers who'd be her peers. Senator Patricia Vance from the funeral appeared with two other senators, all smiles and political warmth. General Morgan, I have to get used to that title. Congratulations. Your work on the Pacific Theater intelligence integration has been absolutely critical. The Joint Chiefs speak very highly of you. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the Armed Services Committee's support. Vance lowered her voice fractionally. I understand your family is here today. That must feel vindicating after everything. Rachel followed the senator's gaze to where Patricia stood with Marcus and Vanessa, all three of them clearly out of their depth in a room full of generals and senators. Emma had separated from them, was talking with a group of junior officers near the refreshments. It feels like accuracy, Senator. Vindication suggests I needed their approval to know my worth. I stopped needing that years ago. Vance's smile turned genuine. That's the right answer. Too many officers tie their identity to external validation. You've always been different. The senator moved on. Rachel made her way toward her family, watching them watch her interact with people whose names they'd only seen in news reports. Marcus looked like he might vomit. Vanessa's designer dress was understated compared to the military dress uniforms surrounding them. Patricia just looked lost. Rachel reached them. Patricia stepped forward first, arms opening for a hug. Rachel accepted it, but didn't initiate, didn't extend the gesture beyond what politeness required. You were magnificent. Patricia's voice broke. Watching them talk about your accomplishments, your service, everything you've done, I'm so sorry we never understood. Understanding requires asking questions, Mom. You're understanding now because strangers are telling you what I've been showing you for 20 years. Marcus shifted his weight, uncomfortable in his suit that suddenly looked cheap next to the uniform surrounding them. Rachel, I need to tell you something. The FBI came to see me last week. They're offering a deal if I cooperate and return the money I moved offshore. What did you tell them? That I'd take it. I'm pleading guilty to 1 count of securities fraud, 18 months at a federal facility in Lompoc, restitution of $2.1 million, permanent loss of my securities licenses. His voice came out hollow. I sold my house, my car, everything. I'm filing bankruptcy next week. Rachel felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sympathy. Just the cold assessment of someone who'd predicted this exact outcome. And you're telling me this because I need you to know I'm trying to take responsibility. I'm not asking you to help me or save me. I just want you to know I finally get it. Get what? That success isn't what you own or what title you have or what other people think of you. It's whether you can look at yourself in the mirror and know you earned what you have. And I haven't been able to do that for years. The admission landed with more weight than apologies or excuses ever could. Rachel studied her brother, 45 years old, facing federal prison, financial ruin, the complete destruction of the life he'd built on shortcuts and other people's money. He looked smaller than she remembered, older, like reality had physically diminished him. Then learn from it. Use those 18 months to figure out who you actually are instead of who you've been pretending to be. Marcus nodded, stepped back. Vanessa moved forward, her composure more intact, but her eyes carrying the same haunted quality. I filed Chapter 11 last month. Restructured the business, sold 3 properties, downsized the office. Emma helped me find a bankruptcy attorney who's actually competent instead of just expensive. She paused. I'm keeping 2 properties and starting over, building something sustainable instead of impressive. How's that feel? Terrifying? Humiliating? Also kind of freeing? Vanessa's laugh came out shaky. I spent 15 years trying to be the biggest name in luxury real estate. Now I'm just trying to be honest. It's harder and easier at the same time. Rachel recognized the exhaustion in her sister's voice, the particular weariness that came from finally putting down a weight you'd been carrying too long. She'd felt it herself 3 months ago when she'd walked out of that funeral reception and stopped performing for people who refused to see. Emma's been working with you? Every week, she's been teaching me about financial planning, sustainable business models, the difference between leveraging and lying to yourself. Vanessa's expression shifted to something almost wistful. She's remarkable, Rachel. What you did for her education, she's using it to actually help people instead of just climbing some ladder. That's what I hoped for. Patricia pulled them back together, her need for family reconciliation overriding her children's more complicated processing. Can we please have dinner tonight? All of us? Just talk like a family instead of strangers at a ceremony? Rachel checked her watch. I have a classified briefing at 1900 with the DIA director. I can do 1700 to 1830. Patricia's face fell. Clearly, she'd wanted something longer, something that felt more like reunion than obligation. But she recovered quickly. Where? Not somewhere expensive, somewhere honest. They met at a diner in Arlington at 1715, the kind of place where Marines from Quantico grabbed burgers between training exercises. Rachel still wore her dress blues, the new star-catching diner lighting. Her family looked absurdly out of place. Patricia in funeral black repurposed for ceremony, Marcus in his increasingly shabby suit, Vanessa in business casual that cost more than most people's monthly rent, Emma in the professional wardrobe she'd been building for her State Department position. They ordered. Silence settled over the table, heavy with things unsaid and wounds still raw. Emma broke it. I start at State next month. International Security Division. I'll be doing analysis on foreign military capabilities, threat assessments, briefing senior officials. Her eyes met Rachel's. My supervisor knows I'm your niece. She said she requested me specifically because anyone you mentored must be worth watching. Rachel felt something shift in her chest, a small warmth breaking through the control she'd maintained for months. That's on you, Emma. I gave you information. You built competence. Still, Emma's voice carried fierce gratitude. You changed my life by making education possible. I'm going to spend my career trying to live up to that investment. Patricia watched the exchange, her expression complicated. I want to understand something. Why Emma? Why did you pay for her education when you'd already spent so much on Marcus and Vanessa and us? Because Emma asked me questions about what I did instead of assumptions about what I didn't do. Because when she was 16 and everyone else in this family was mocking my career, she asked me what it was like to serve. Because she saw me. The answer landed in silence. Patricia's hands twisted around her coffee cup. I want to see you now. Really see you. Not who I needed you to be so I could feel good about my life, but who you actually are. Rachel studied her mother, 68 years old, widow, facing the reality that she'd spent 2 decades being supported by a daughter she'd dismissed as a failure. There was grief in Patricia's face, genuine recognition of what had been lost. But Rachel had learned in combat that grief without changed behavior was just performance. Then ask me questions, Mom. Real questions. About the work, the deployments, the decisions I make every day. Not questions designed to make me fit into some narrative where you're the wise mother guiding the struggling daughter. Questions from genuine curiosity about a life you don't understand. Patricia took a shaky breath. What's the hardest decision you've ever had to make? Afghanistan, 2008. I was embedded with a Marine unit providing intelligence support. We had credible information that a high-value target was in a compound. We also had credible information that there were civilians in the same building. Women, children. Rules of engagement said we couldn't strike with that level of civilian risk. But the target was responsible for attacks that had killed 42 Marines in the previous 6 months. The table had gone completely silent. Even the diner noise faded into background. I had to decide whether to call in the strike knowing civilians would die, or let the target escape knowing more Marines would die later. I chose the strike. 16 people died. 3 were enemy combatants. 13 were civilians, including 5 children. Patricia's face went white. Oh my God! I see their faces every time I close my eyes. I did the math, made the tactical decision, called in coordinates that killed children. And I'd make the same choice again because the alternative was more dead Marines. That's what service means, Mom. It's not patriotic speeches and flag waving. It's living with decisions that have no good outcomes, only less terrible ones. Marcus set down his burger, unable to eat. How do you live with that? By remembering that the alternative was worse, by honoring the people who died by making sure their deaths meant something tactically, by accepting that this is the cost of the work. Rachel's voice stayed level, factual. You asked what's hard about what I do. That's what's hard, not the ceremonies or the promotions or the recognition, the weight of consequences. Vanessa wiped her eyes. And you've been carrying that weight while we treated you like you were wasting your life filing paperwork. Yes. The admission settled over them like ash. Patricia reached across the table, took Rachel's hand. I don't know how to fix what we did to you. I don't know how to give you back 20 years of acknowledgement you should have had. You can't fix it. You can only do better going forward. Rachel didn't pull her hand away, but she didn't squeeze back either. I'm not interested in apologies or grand gestures. I'm interested in changed behavior. Ask questions. Listen to answers. Stop assuming you know what my life looks like. That's what I need. Can we do that? Can we start over? We're not starting over. We're starting from exactly where we are, which is me with clear boundaries about what I'll accept and you with a choice about whether to respect them. Patricia nodded slowly. I'll respect them, I promise. Rachel checked her watch, 18:25. She needed to leave for her briefing. She stood, dropped cash on the table to cover her portion. I have to go. The DIA director doesn't wait. When will we see you again? Patricia's voice carried desperation that Rachel recognized as fear of losing connection completely. I'll be at Quantico through March. You can visit one Sunday afternoon. I'll show you the cottage, we'll walk on the beach, we'll talk like adults having a conversation instead of family performing reunion. What about after March, when you take the DIA position? Then I'll be in Washington full-time. We can have dinner once a month if we're both committed to actually knowing each other instead of performing family. Patricia stood, hugged Rachel harder this time. Once a month is more than we've had in 20 years. I'll take it. Rachel accepted the embrace, returned it minimally, stepped back. Emma stood to leave with her. I'll walk you to your car. They walked through Arlington cold, past restaurants and bars where young professionals were starting their Friday nights. Emma waited until they were out of earshot. Thank you for what you said in there, about why you helped me. It was true. Still. Emma stopped at Rachel's rental car, leaned against it. I know the next few months are going to be hard for you. New position, new responsibilities, your family trying to rebuild something that was never healthy to begin with. If you need someone who's not trying to get something from you, who just wants to know you, I'm here. Rachel felt that warmth again, the one that came from being seen clearly by someone who didn't need her to be anyone other than who she actually was. I might take you up on that. Please do. Emma smiled. I learned from the best how to serve without needing credit. Let me practice by being in your corner without needing anything back. They hugged, brief, genuine, the kind of connection that didn't require performance or history, just mutual respect. Emma walked back toward the diner. Rachel drove toward the Pentagon, toward another classified briefing, toward the work that mattered more than family drama or emotional reconciliation. March brought transition. Rachel handed over command of MCRD San Diego to her replacement in a ceremony that felt both monumental and routine. The ritual of military succession, power transferred with precision and protocol. Her Marines lined the parade deck. Her successor received the colors. Rachel stood in dress blues for the last time as installation commander and felt the weight of that responsibility lift. She flew to Washington the next day, reported to the Pentagon, started her new role as Deputy Director for Defense Intelligence. The work consumed her immediately. Intelligence assessments, threat analysis, coordination with allied services, briefings for senior officials who needed to understand capabilities and intentions of hostile nations. She worked 16-hour days, briefed the National Security Council twice in her first month, earned respect through competence rather than rank. Emma started at State the same week. They had coffee every Thursday morning at a small place equidistant from the Pentagon and Foggy Bottom. Emma brought questions about navigating bureaucracy, about balancing institutional politics with mission focus, about how to be effective without being loud. Rachel answered with the accumulated wisdom of 24 years learning those exact lessons. Patricia visited Carlsbad in March as promised. They walked on the beach, talked about nothing consequential. The weather, books Patricia was reading, Rachel's morning routine. No drama, no apologies, just two people learning to occupy space together without expectations. In April, Marcus reported to federal prison in Lompoc. He called Rachel the night before, voice steady for the first time in months. I wanted to thank you for not bailing me out, for letting me face this. You're welcome. I mean it. If you'd paid my legal fees or covered my restitution, I'd have learned nothing except that I could keep failing and you'd keep catching me. This way I learn who I actually am when I can't hide behind money or connections. Use the time well, Marcus. 18 months can change you if you let it. The call ended. Rachel filed it away in the part of her mind reserved for family. Important enough to acknowledge, not important enough to derail her day. Vanessa's restructuring worked. By May, she'd stabilized her business, built a client base that valued competence over flash, started teaching financial literacy workshops for women entrepreneurs. She sent Rachel updates monthly, not asking for approval, just sharing progress. Rachel read them, responded briefly, maintained the boundary between support and enmeshment. Emma thrived at State. She called Rachel in June with news that she'd been selected for a special assignment analyzing Chinese military modernization for the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Her supervisor called it unprecedented for someone 3 months into government service. They're putting me on the project because of you, because they know you trained me. They're putting you on the project because you're competent, and they need competence. I gave you information. You built the ability to use it. Emma's laugh came through warm. You're never going to take credit for anything, are you? Credit is for people who need external validation. I just need to know the work gets done right. In August, Rachel made full general, second star, promoted ahead of schedule based on her DIA work. The ceremony was smaller this time, just senior intelligence community leaders and the Marines she'd served with across 2 decades. Her family attended without her asking, sat quietly in the back, stayed for the reception, but didn't dominate her attention. Patricia found her as the event was ending, embraced her briefly. I'm proud of you. Thank you. Are we doing better at being family? Rachel considered the question honestly. We're doing different. Different is all I need. Patricia accepted that, stepped back, left Rachel to her colleagues, and the work that defined her more than blood ever had. October brought California fall, dry heat, Santa Ana winds, the smell of sage and ocean salt. Rachel took a week of leave, the first in 18 months, drove down to the cottage in Carlsbad for no reason except that she could. She ran on the beach at dawn, read intelligence assessments on her deck in the afternoons, cooked simple meals and ate them watching the Pacific turn colors as the sun set. Emma drove down on Thursday, brought Thai food and stories about State Department dysfunction that made Rachel laugh with recognition. They ate on the deck, watched surfers catching final waves before dark. Can I ask you something personal? Depends what it is. Do you ever regret it? The silence, the years of hiding who you were, the cost of being invisible while holding everyone up? Rachel thought about 24 years of service, 6 combat deployments, decisions that had killed people and saved people and changed the course of operations. Most Americans would never know happened. She thought about mortgage payments and tuition checks and medical bills, about standing alone at promotions and ceremonies, while her family celebrated people who'd accomplished less. She thought about the weight of performance and the freedom that came from finally putting it down. The hiding allowed me to focus on the work without distraction. If my family had known, they would have wanted involvement, input, emotional labor I couldn't afford to give. Silence protected my mission. And when the silence ended, it ended on my terms, in my timing, with outcomes I could accept. You changed all their lives by revealing the truth. I changed their perception. Their lives were already built on my foundation. I just made the architecture visible. Emma smiled. That's very you. Precise and slightly terrifying. Precise keeps people alive. Terrifying keeps them honest. They sat in comfortable quiet, watching darkness settle over the ocean. Finally, Emma spoke again. Thank you. For everything. Not just the money or the mentoring or the job, for showing me what it looks like to build a life that matters instead of a life that impresses. Rachel felt that warmth again, the recognition that something she'd built had value beyond her own survival. You're going to do important work, Emma. Work that makes a difference. That's the point of all of this. Not revenge or vindication, but passing forward the values that matter. I won't let you down. You couldn't if you tried. You're already who you need to be. You just needed permission to believe it. Emma left at 10, drove back to DC and the career she was building. Rachel sat on her deck until midnight, listening to waves, thinking about trajectories and outcomes. Her phone buzzed. Patricia. I'm reading a book about military service. Trying to understand what you've been doing all these years, it's harder than I thought. Rachel typed back, most important things are, Patricia, can we talk about it when I visit next month? Rachel, yes. Simple. Honest. The beginning of something that might eventually resemble understanding. She turned off her phone, walked down to the beach in darkness, let the Pacific wash over her feet. The water was cold. The sand was solid. The stars overhead existed without needing permission or acknowledgement. For 24 years, she'd served in silence, carried weight invisible to the people it protected, built a life that mattered more than it impressed. The silence had cost her family connection, emotional intimacy, the simple comfort of being seen. It had given her focus, clarity, mission accomplishment, and the particular satisfaction that came from knowing her work saved lives regardless of whether anyone knew her name. Now the silence had transformed into something else. Not performance, not hiding, but selective engagement. She showed herself to people who earned access through genuine curiosity rather than entitled expectation. She shared her life with those who valued substance over appearance. She protected her mission while allowing connection with people who understood that service required sacrifice. The balance felt right, hard-earned, carefully maintained, worth the price. Rachel walked back up the beach to her cottage, to the life she'd built brick by brick without permission or applause, to the work that waited tomorrow and every day after. The medals on her dress blues told a story most people would never read. The scars on her soul told stories she'd never share. The silence she'd maintained for 2 decades had transformed into the most powerful sound of all, the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was worth and didn't need anyone else to confirm it. She slept dreamlessly that night, the ocean providing rhythm, the work providing purpose, the life she'd built providing proof that silence wasn't absence. Silence was choice. And Rachel Morgan had spent 24 years choosing exactly who she wanted to be, regardless of who anyone else needed her to become. In the morning, she'd drive back to Washington, back to briefings and threat assessments and decisions that affected national security. Back to the work that defined her more accurately than family ever had. Back to the life she'd earned through competence, sacrifice, and the understanding that true power never announced itself. It simply was. But tonight, she was just a woman on a beach in California, finally free of the weight of being unseen, finally comfortable being known only by those who'd earned the privilege, finally at peace with the silence that had saved her, and the truth that had freed her. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and perfect. The ocean continued its endless conversation with the shore, and Rachel Morgan slept the sleep of someone who'd completed every mission, including the hardest one, the mission of becoming exactly who she was meant to be, regardless of the cost or the audience or the recognition. That was enough. That had always been enough. She just finally had the space to know it.